Hello, everybody. I hope you're well. I'm back on today to talk about a topic which you've probably heard me discuss briefly in other videos, but I thought it'd be good to come and share more deeply on it today. I know I did a video recently on entity attacks and spiritual attack and spiritual warfare and what we're really looking at with these things. And as you know, on this channel, I tend to go against the grain in terms of the more accepted narratives when it comes to things like this, and so I'm not going to deviate from my normal program today, and I'm going to hopefully paint a picture of this topic in a way that helps you move past the tension and discomfort that comes from feeling that you are being affected or infiltrated or influenced by external forces or energies. So the posture that we are essentially programmed to respond with when we feel some discomfort is to reject or to turn away from or to put up a wall against of protection. And that's understandable, of course. That's carnal survival 101. But as we are evolving out of our carnal nature into a more heart-centered way of being, the way that we respond to energy will need to have an adjustment as well, because energy is what essentially is the fabric of creation. Energy crystallized into matter is how we experience form, but the base of that is still energy. And it's important to recognize that. As much as many of us would say we know that, I think often we don't investigate what that really means about how we are relating to one another and how reality is structured. Because energy doesn't have a mechanism of personal preference as regards to the human condition and opinion. It doesn't yield to our sense of right or wrong or justice or our ideals. It's there in resonance all the time. It's a dance to maintain balance in creation and a way for God, the divine, to express itself, to learn about itself, to know itself. And also, something that's important to caveat before we get into it further is that I always talk about the fact that we're all one. And as I hope you have understood from watching the videos, don't come at that sentiment with some airy-fairy, nothing matters, everything's fine perspective. It's more that we are still living our experience of duality and separation, but understand behind that it is still all one, and that in itself makes sure that while we live in duality and polarity, that we remember that, so that our choices reflect that and that reality reflects that back to us. And that's the important thing, because we do live in a hall of mirrors, and as I mentioned in other videos, when energy is in our field presenting and potentially causing discomfort, it's there to offer an opportunity for us to see something about how we are navigating creation. And that's a very important point, because that knowing alone is enough to change the posture of rejection and barrier to openness and curiosity about what that energy is there to communicate. Because whilst there are narratives out there that have been pushed through institutions like the church, for example, about Satan and the devil coming to harm you, the truth is that nothing energetically can cause you any harm unless you are making some kind of deal with that. And so that puts the power back in the individual's hands as to look at, I don't have to make a contract here. I'm not giving this energy anything to hook into, and therefore it can't harm me. It can only pass through me. And that is, I suppose, the posture that I think is very important for where we're headed, is to move from that fear-based separative mindset into a more open understanding that if it's all one, then whatever is here can't be here to harm me. It can only be here to reveal something to me, and so if I lead with that inquiry, it immediately softens my posture and puts my nervous system in a more relaxed position, whereby I can meet this energy with curiosity and openness rather than guardedness and rejection. Because when you reject something, when you put up a wall against something, energetically what that's doing is just creating static and friction in the field, which only accumulates out here until eventually that is so gross that it needs to penetrate to have that revelation. And so that's where we might experience a big whack in our life, where something really takes us down and we have to go into the pit for a while to have, a rebirth, let's say, in some way. And many people would perhaps call that like a dark night of the soul, where there is such a destruction of the person that we thought we were, or a part of our identity that's been dissolved, and it leaves us feeling empty and hollow, and we have to kind of come back from that. And so that can be a very illuminating experience, and for many it can lead them onto higher planes of insight and wisdom. But it doesn't necessarily need to be that dramatic either. And the more we get used to laying down our need to protect and barrier and contain ourselves against this world, the easier it is for us to move through some of those experiences with grace. The truth is, you can't isolate yourself from creation. Because it's all one. Any wall that you put up around yourself will eventually have to get taken down, because we are here to take part in it. And so we, through self-inquiry, through wisdom, through experience, can get to a point where we no longer need to be in a state of polarity with it. Even though we experience polarity, we don't have to put up a barrier, because anything that's coming here is simply there to reveal something to us. And so the posture is always, what do you want me to know? And how can I let this experience, move through me rather than stagnate around me? So a posture change would be, rather than being like this, is to be like this. Because when you're open, when you aren't attached, when you're not offering a hook through reaction or avoidance, craving, there is nothing that energy can hook into anyway. It's all going to come down to the contract you make in that moment, whether you start to fear it or crave it, avoid it or crave it. That's what creates the imbalance, is when there is an attachment to rejection or an attachment to magnetism, because both those things create disharmony in the field, and that disharmony needs to be balanced at some point. So obviously there are people out there who have had traumatic experiences, and it's not to say that those people should just be able to walk out into the world again and just face everything. Of course there is a time, just like if we break a bone, we wear a splint until the bone is healed, and then we take the splint off. And that's the key point, because there must always come a time where we let any experience go. So this message here is not specifically to those who have just experienced something horrific or traumatic. This is about those who are maybe stuck in a pattern, to where that level of avoidance has actually now become a point where you feel yourself separated or isolated from the world. For example, if you're the kind of person that lives in the realm of, I'm 5D, everyone else is 3D and asleep, and I can't talk to anyone, I can't talk to my neighbours, I can't talk to my family. This is for you, because that is just a narrative that you are playing that's actually keeping you separate from everybody, rather than embodying the truth that many of you are trying to assert, that we're all one. Because a unified perspective doesn't have games of higher vibes, lower vibes, 5D, 3D. It understands that low vibes are just as important as high vibes. That low frequency and high frequency are equally necessary for creation to remain balanced. And so there isn't this hierarchical separative idea of one being better than the other. you don't avoid negative vibes with positive vibes only, because that is impossible to be in the positive polarity forever, because if you are, you will eventually burn out and come crashing back down into the negative polarity, and that's where you're going to have those really uncomfortable experiences. And so this is what I'm talking about. You can't avoid one for the other, eternally, because that's what brings that crash, that's what brings that massive whack. We want to be able to walk that middle path where we're not attached to the low and we're not attached to the high, because then neither pole is going to knock us off our perch. We're not going to get stuck in depression, and we're not going to get stuck in fluff and love and light before crashing back down anyway. So energetic balance is the key. And so the energetic truth of it is, what I reject, what I put a wall around, what I put a barrier around, does not resolve or dissolve that energy or issue. It just keeps it circulating until there is a seam, rip in my aura, which might come from an argument, a moment of trauma or something, that then finds a way to get in and start causing more havoc. So the daily rhythm is not about how can I put up a wall around myself today so I can go out to the shopping centre. It's about how am I centering myself in the presence of God right now and in everything that I do, so that none of this stuff can actually hook into me, and that any energy that comes my way is actually going to come and be transmuted through me and then offered back to God with grace, because I've got the capacity to do that. Your heart is like a black hole and white hole star simultaneously, in that it emanates a reality from you, but it also draws in. It's an emanation and a drawing in constantly. And so it's like a holy grail. But the wisdom of the holy grail is that it stays fluid, it stays in motion, so that you are constantly giving, and God, by virtue of that, gives you more to give. The thing about love is it's been used in a polarized way of give, receive. But when we talk about unconditional love, we are talking about the fact that there is no condition to love. It just keeps giving. It's just, we do whatever we need to get from A to B. We don't create a story of you're more deserving than you, or I'm not as deserving as you. Any of that stuff that puts us in separation is where love is not being used unconditionally. Unconditional means no condition. In other words, there is nothing, there is no story, there is no event, there is nothing that could happen that would stop me in a moment opening my heart and seeing you through the eyes of God. That's what unconditional love looks like. And that doesn't come with an idea of a barrier that I have to put around myself. Because if your heart is truly open for God, that is your protection anyway. And it's not that you have to go and put yourself in situations all the time where the vibration is low, let's say. It's about trusting that God will put you where you need to be. And all you need to do is emanate his presence in that space. So you don't have to micromanage how you can make sure that you don't run into discomfort along your way, because whatever you are avoiding will give chase. And this is fundamental for people on an awakening or spiritual journey. Is much of the teaching is about how you can maintain equilibrium by avoidance, but it's not about avoidance. It's about maintaining equilibrium by being rooted in the presence of God right here and right now, 24/7, so that wherever you end up, you just emanate that presence, and everything around you is affected by that presence, and that's your offering. Not how can I keep the low vibe people away. It's how can I be the light around the low vibe people. Again, I will talk to Yeshua, because he's famous for not being selective about his friends in regards to their character. He just saw people through the eyes of God, which is why he was judged by the religious order. You know, to me, it's very obvious, but I understand we've been living through, a long time of narratives that are built in separation rather than unity. And we have a lot of people out there talking about unity, talking about 5D, talking about oneness, but when it comes to the crunch, that's not enacted. And I don't think it fully can be all the time, because we are still living in a realm of duality for good cause. But we have to be aware of the contradictions and the hypocrisy in the language that we're using versus the actions that we are taking. Because if I'm talking about 5D consciousness whilst also talking about how to maintain a boundary around myself so I can't be affected by low vibe people, I'm completely missing the point. I'm completely missing the point. Because your boundaries are for you. You set a boundary, you set your own personal constitution and code of conduct to make sure that you don't overstep your own boundaries of morality and virtue and integrity, so that you can maintain harmony with creation, not so you can keep creation out. It's so that you can walk rightly with God. That's what it's for. That's what the law is for, to make sure that it's all in harmony. So your personal code is about maintaining harmony. And if that's designed to keep others out, if it's designed to keep yourself isolated, then you're not in congruence with creation, because creation doesn't have one thing separate to another. That's a complete falsehood through the lens of unity. So again, to be clear, I'm not suggesting that this is applicable to every single person right now. This is applicable to those who have danced on the checkerboard of good and evil and me versus you for long enough, and are starting to realize that any narrative that they are living in that is seeded through separation is going to ultimately bring a moment where they're going to have to face that. So these big drops into despair and chaos don't need to be so big, but they will be while ever we are avoiding them.